the same waving that you would have seen just a minute ago. Hi everyone, my name's Amy Boyd. I'm a Principal Cloud Advocate here at Microsoft, and I am joined by Paul. Paul, could you introduce yourself for me?
Hey there, Amy. This is Paul DiCarlo. I'm a lead for data advocacy here at Microsoft within developer relations, and happy to be joining y'all today for this kickoff series for Learn Live, getting started with Microsoft Fabric.
Indeed. We are going to be covering getting started with end-to-end analytics with Lakehouses and Microsoft Fabric. You're going to get like a 2-for-1 in this Learn Live. We're actually going to be covering 2 different modules to make it well worth your time and really get you started with Microsoft Fabric. As I said, my name's Amy Boyd. I'm joined by Paul DiCarlo, and we are going to be walking through one of these Learn Live modules with you. If you've never joined a Learn Live before, they are all based on Microsoft Learn modules, which are free learning. You can actually follow along whilst we're doing this stream. So if you go to aka.ms/learnlive-2023-0829A, you can get started with the first module that we're going to go through. But first and foremost, let's jump into who else is going to be joining us. We also have some amazing moderators, so please say hi to Shannon Lindsay and Kim Fei Low, who are both in the chat. So whatever streaming service you're on, they are there. They're there to communicate with you, and it's really an interactive type session. So it's going to be quite chatty. Myself and Paul are going to be giving lots of information, but if you have questions, please do ask them. Also, as I mentioned, we've actually got 2 modules we're going to be covering. We'll start off with Introduction to End-to-End Analytics using Microsoft Fabric, which is the start of a longer learning path we're going to go through here. And then we'll move on to Getting Started with Lakehouses in Microsoft Fabric as a second. QR codes are going to be all over this presentation. Have some kind of device with a camera ready, and you can actually scan these QR codes and use them in order to get access to the modules. Me and Paul were talking through this before. We actually highly recommend you get started with these modules as we do as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of be walking through them. Paul's going to be sharing his screen based on a lot of that. And then we're going to kind of talk through and then add some flavor to some of this as well and give you some extra insights. As I mentioned, this is live and interactive. Please chat with us, talk to us. We're excited to kind of hear what you've got to say. And also, Shannon and Kim Fei are going to be in the chat answering your questions. So use this time not just to learn, but also get any questions that you have answered. And then we can kind of hopefully see you for the rest of the series, which will be great. So Paul, do you want to tell us more about the series?
Yeah, so this is actually the first of 9 upcoming episodes where we'll be talking about various different workloads inside of Microsoft Fabric. If you want to get started with this and register for these, get notifications to your inbox, get reminders on your calendar when these live streams are going live, you can head to that link that's shown there on the slide. That's at aka.ms/learnlive, get started Microsoft Fabric. This is, of course, the first one, but you can see we're running this series for 9 weeks. So from now until October 24th, this will be ongoing. And while you're here, we're also doing something else here that's going to facilitate your learning. So not only can you tune into the live streams and learn, but we're also going to encourage folks to get started with the Fabric Cloud Skills Challenge. So you can go to aka.ms/fabric-CSC in your web browser, and that will bring you to a Cloud Skills Challenge that's going to track your ability to complete the Learn modules that are covered in all of these sessions. And what's really cool here, you'll be able to compare yourself across a leaderboard that includes, at this time, over 440 folks have signed up for this. I think that number is only going to go up, but you can sort of see where folks are in terms of the content that we'll be discussing. And you can also just make sure that you're learning everything that there is to learn as part of this Learn Live series. And of course, we do have one prerequisite that is required. Hopefully, many of you have already accomplished this in some way, shape, or form. But if you haven't, it's totally okay to jump off and do that, especially while we go through the first module today. You can head to aka.ms/upgrade-2-fabric And this will give you access to a blog post on the Fabric community site, another site that I highly recommend. This will bring you directly there where you'll be able to learn how to get registered for Microsoft Fabric, how to enable that, whether you're in an enterprise organization, whether you're an independent developer, whether you're a startup, or whether you're a student entrepreneur that's wanting to start the next big data thing. We've got the instructions for you to get you started. And the best of all, it's 100% free. It won't cost you anything. And it's going to put you onto the next generation data platform that is Microsoft Fabric. So definitely highly encourage folks to check that out. And that's going to be a necessity in order to complete the Learn module content. So go ahead and get started there. And with that, I think we're about ready to start.
I think we are. I was going to say, so just to be super clear, we're actually going to be covering quite a lot over this next set of time. So our objectives are, we're going to describe this end-to-end analytics in Microsoft Fabric. We're going to kind of demystify a little bit what Microsoft Fabric is, because I think that can be quite confusing given it's, it's pretty new. Lots of people are just hearing about it. We're then going to describe some of the core features and capabilities of Lakehouses. And what we'll learn actually is that Lakehouses are the core of what everything that we're going to build on top of later in the series. And then we're actually going to go into creating a Lakehouse, ingesting data into files and tables, and then actually querying that Lakehouse using SQL. So we're going to kind of take that end to end. We're even going to see it in a Power BI report. It doesn't actually say there, but we will. Okay, so let's get started with our first module. So if you're following along, remember, we're going to start the introduction to end-to-end analytics using Microsoft Fabric. And if you go to aka.ms/learnlive-2023 0829A, you'll be able to find where this module is and get started with us. So with that, Paul, can you show us, if you go to that link, what does it look like? What should people be landing on?
Absolutely. So if you follow the link that Amy had just mentioned, you should be presented with the following. This is the actual Learn module that we'll be following through with. Hopefully you've created an account here. You'll be able to track your progress. Again, that's another thing that makes it easy to participate as well in the Cloud Skills Challenge. With that said, if you've navigated here, you can scroll down and we're going to actually jump into the first part here, which is the introduction. And this is going to get us all acquainted with learning what Microsoft Fabric is, show you how your enterprise can achieve analytics in a single platform. And we'll talk about what this means and how you could get excited about this in all the other sessions that we have as part of the series. So the first thing to sort of note here is Microsoft Fabric is an end-to-end analytics platform, and it's offered as a software as a service, single integrated environment that can be used by data professionals across the business. And really the big thing that this accomplishes, being a single platform, is the concept of collaboration. Because all of the services are already integrated by default, it allows you to do common things that you would do on a data platform. For example, the ingestion, storage, processing, and analyzation. All of that is just handled for you because all of those are features of Microsoft Fabric. And not only that, it's a really interesting how this tool is useful really across the organization for both your citizen as well as your professional data practitioners. It can allow you to make decisions, perform data science experiments, ingest data in real time, all of these various different things based on these built-in features and functionalities. So these include the following services, which are growing, by the way. So this is just what's there today, but there is a vision that this product will grow to include even more scenarios that folks can take advantage of. These include data engineering, which we will be taking a hands-on look at later in the second Learn module. Data integration, which is that being able to bring data from one place to another, maybe another cloud into Fabric or another place within Microsoft Azure. Data warehousing, where you can perform transact SQL queries against data. Real-time analytics for data that's in motion or in flight. Data science, which is, of course, the bread and butter of if you're trying to do artificial intelligence and machine learning style workloads. And business intelligence, which is, of course, being able to visualize, make sense of your data, and help you to guide business decisions that may arise in your organization. So we're going to introduce all of these. We'll go ahead and get started. Let's click over to the next unit where we'll explore end-to-end analytics with Microsoft Fabric. So as we mentioned, why this was built is that exact feature I was just talking about. So there's typically, when you're building a data platform, and especially if you think about large organizations, you may have various different services coming from different vendors. And the trouble with that is getting them all to work together. How does one piece communicate with the next? And how do you implement these things within your network, your firewalls and infrastructure and all that sort of thing? Because Fabric is a software as a service offering, it's literally just there for you. And not only that, it's built on an architecture where all data is stored in a single open format, which we'll talk about in more detail, in something called OneLake. OneLake is actually this layer where all the data resides, and it can be accessed by any of the analytics engines within Microsoft Fabric. So whether you want to perform Spark queries, SQL queries, etc., those will always be interacting with data stored in the OneLake. Because of this architecture, it's scalable, it's cost-effective, accessible from anywhere with an internet connection. And of course, you don't have to maintain patches or security updates yourself. Those are provided by Microsoft. So I've mentioned this a little bit, that this architecture here is a single integrated environment. And you can see all of those various services that I sort of talked about here all sit on top of this common OneLake area that you'll see here. This builds up that software as a service foundation for Microsoft Fabric. And what you should think about this as, an easy way to think about this, I've said this before, is OneLake is where all the data resides. And you can sort of think about it like the OneDrive for your data. So if you've used Office 365 and you're sort of familiar with storing all your files and content in OneDrive, it's similar, but think about this for an entire data platform, or what could essentially comprise of your entire data estate. All of the workflows that work on top of this, including the warehousing, data engineering, real-time analytics, Power BI experiences, all make use of this. And this is a thing to think about, because while it's a simplified architecture, it's also a scalable, nearly limitless storage-based architecture that enables all of these various different functionalities on top of it. So you can sort of think about this like, if you have data and you want to do anything with it, Microsoft Fabric has something for you to accomplish that. And what I love too is that this is not a finished product. It is something that is building and growing. And it's also growing with the voice of the user base. So I will plug here and say that if you were to go to community, the Fabric community website, you can actually go there, promote ideas. These will actually get listened to by the product teams, possibly turn into a future feature addition later on down the road.
Paul, now, quick question. You know, if someone's already in the Azure atmosphere for data, we might have some people in the comments who are well versed with our data services. I see the word data factory there. Makes me think of Azure Data Factory, or Synapse. I feel like I've heard of that before. Power BI. Is this all new, or is this bringing stuff together?
No, this is a great question. It's actually built on these foundational products that have, most of which, with the exception of Data Activator being specific, have existed in some form or capacity as standalone Azure-based services. They're now being brought across into Fabric as integrated services that are integrated with each other. What that means, they're not necessarily one-to-one, but they're pretty close in terms of parity, in terms of features and functionality. You may find there is something that you can do in the standalone service today that may not come across in Microsoft Fabric, but for the most part, it's there. And again, those would be the specific types of feedback areas that definitely we would want users to raise if you're coming from that existing ecosystem and jumping into here. We would certainly love to know more about those types of use cases that folks might be encountering. So it's a great question. Going more into this concept of OneLake, we mentioned this open data format. So what OneLake actually is, it's built on top of Azure Data Lake storage, and you can store data technically in any format, whether that's video files, audio files, etc. But there's something special here in that you can have data, especially if it's tabular data, say, and you'll see this later on, like something like a CSV file can be converted into the Delta Parquet format. And what this will allow for is optimized execution of any of the analysis engines. So when we have data that's stored in a tabular format or table format in Microsoft Fabric, it will always be stored in Delta Parquet file format. And that reason is because those analytics engines can do things with it in way more optimized ways, since they're actually tuned to work with that file format. Another interesting thing too is this concept called shortcuts, where if you have a reference to some data that's like commonly used across the organization, it's common sometimes, not necessarily good practice, that those large data files might be getting copied across, and that's creating duplication of data that may be unnecessary. What's interesting about shortcuts is shortcuts will allow you to quickly source existing data without having to copy it or move it. And this can even be derived from data stored in additional clouds, like not just Microsoft Azure. For example, Amazon S3 is one that is actually supported with this shortcut feature, which we'll look at a little bit as we get deeper into this. So what you can sort of see here is, again, all of those experiences that make this up work with data stored in one lake storage, and how they communicate across there might depend on the actual experience you're using. So for warehousing, you're probably going to be communicating across with T-SQL to speak to data stored in the Delta format that's used by the finance department. Or similarly, data engineering could use Spark, or data integration uses Spark notebooks to process customer data that's, again, stored in the Delta format. You're going to notice that repeating here because that's the common data format here. Real-time analytics is going to be communicated with using KQL or Kusto query language, and business intelligence can be provided through Power BI analysis services. Again, wherever that data resides in your business, as long as it's stored in one lake, served up in that Delta file format, that will allow it to be serviced up to any of these experiences and worked with. So it's interesting. There's quite a bit of power here in what you can accomplish. And of course, if you're interested in learning more about these experiences, they are explained here. But we've sort of covered that already. So I'm going to go ahead and skip forward to showing you what this sort of looks like, and also talking about security and governance. So it is centrally governed, since it is a SaaS application. That makes it pretty easy in your organization if you want to like apply to different security groups, or enable for your whole organization the ability to access Fabric features and functionalities. That can be enabled in something called the Administrator Center, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So, but before I do, Amy is going to go ahead and kick off telling us just like how this architecture actually enables more of that concept of collaboration, I think, that we hit on, or unification, if you want to call it that, across the various departments. So we're going to go ahead and hear more about that. And
oh no. Oh no, she didn't. I can't believe that. That everyone has to do it once, right? So I just took it out of Paul's hands. I was just stuck on mute for
I didn't say it
for a second then. Paul, just a quick question for you that came in the chat was Microsoft Purview. You mentioned sort of security and governance. We're going to take a quick look at that in a minute, at what that actually means, sort of thing. How does Microsoft Purview sit with any of this?
Purview is roadmapped as going to be a supported feature for performing governance on data stored in Fabric. Where that's at today depends on what you have access to, essentially. But that is a feature that is certainly on the roadmap, that is coming, and it is being built more or less as we speak. But as far as we talk about security and governance features today, we're just going to talk about those from sort of the administration level. But that is something certainly to keep an eye out on, and it's something that is promised in the future roadmap of Microsoft Fabric.
Great. No, thank you for answering that one. But as you said, onto data teams, right? Because most of what Paul covered there before that security element was, you know, this great one lake that and the common data file, all of these services calling into it. And so that kind of brings me to data teams. I think it's really important that we press on this just a little bit as to what this is going to mean that's different to what it was in the past. I brought up the fact that, you know, Data Factory was up there, Azure Synapse was up there, Power BI was up there. These are not things, if you've been in the Azure sort of data ecosystem for a while, that you won't already recognize. The difference here is the unification of it all at that sort of like base layer. So unified management, unified governance, unified access to different things as well. And I think the access piece is the bit that got me the most. So if we take a look at these kind of four different segments, I think this visual, you know, does a really nice job of explaining it. We had data engineers spending most of their times in these types of technologies, data scientists maybe more over towards the Azure machine learning side, data analysts kind of dabble in, whether it's real time, whether it's data warehousing, and then that kind of visualization piece. And then never forget the decision makers. I feel like when we're talking technical personas, we only ever talk about the three from the left. Actually, the decision makers are the reason any of us kind of exist in some senses. The point of data is to provide decision makers with insights to then go and act on, right? But the ability to connect all of these different places in one way just makes things a little bit easier. I think on the examples I resonate the most with is data analyst. So anyone who's been in Power BI, right, we all know the demo is never real life. If you have a real data set that you're actually sort of like being able to build reporting on, number one, it's never just one data set. And that's one of the wonderful things about Power BI, connecting lots of different data sources. Fabric's awesome for that too. But actually, the data set as you get it is probably not in the format that you're going to need it for business intelligence workloads and using it in Power BI. And so you have to do, small little tweaks. Sometimes you do that in the desktop, maybe sometimes you might need to go to the data source, and that's probably more recommended for reuse than keeping everything in your Power BI file. And that's the key, right? You don't have to now be like, oh, I have to do it in a certain technology or using the right technology for the right things, but also the fact that if you make any transformations, it's available in Fabric for then the data engineers to be able to have a better conversation about the changes that you're making. And potentially, do you need to be making them? Is that something we can integrate into the data engineering part of the life cycle? Like, is that valuable for others as well? And so for me, I think the key thing is you're going to be working close together. So get to know your neighbors in your data teams, because you're going to be working a lot closer with them in Fabric. And that's a really cool thing to be able to do. Also, from the skilling side, me and Paul work in this part of the business a lot. This makes it so much easier to cross into different roles as well. So when you're thinking about your career, when you're thinking about your resume, how can you show that movement into being a data scientist? Or how can you choose that movement from administrator into data engineer or something like that? Have a think about these things, because Fabric really opens doors for different things like that.
Excellent. Well, I think at this point, folks are probably excited because we're ready to turn the keys on and get this thing running. So let's talk here about how to enable and use Microsoft Fabric and what this would look like. So number one, inside your organization, you're going to have specific permissions or be friends with the Fabric administrator, which this is a new, this is actually a newer permission that has just been activated within the Power BI tenant space. It could be a Power Platform admin or Microsoft 365 admin. And it can be enabled at the tenant or capacity level, which means for the entire organization or just a specific group of users. And if you don't have access to Fabric today, definitely you would want to, if you're in a larger enterprise style organization, you'd want to contact that admin to see if it's available and point them to some of the resources that you see here in order to get that activated. But what it looks like when you actually have access here, you would log into your Power BI tenant, and down where the Power BI icon is, you're going to notice these new experiences start to light up here. Some of the ones that we mentioned before, the data factory, data engineering, data science, data warehouse, etc. To actually turn this on, what it would look like, I'll log into my account here and sort of show this. We can click in, and since I'm actually an admin on this tenant, I can click inside of here, go into the admin portal, and you'll see here that we have tenant settings. In my case, this is enabled for the entire organization. This is, again, using this for a demo account purposes for Learn Live today, but you can sort of see where all of this gets controlled. So if you were a Power BI admin in your organization, this would be the place that you could go to enable these features and functionalities for various different teams that may be interested in having access. Another thing to be concerned about is knowing whether you have the ability to create Fabric-enabled workspaces. And we'll talk about this when we get a little bit more hands-on in the next module. We'll bring this up, but when you create a workspace, you want to ensure that you're choosing one that has the ability to create Fabric artifacts or Fabric items. What that essentially means today is that there will be a trial that you can activate that will enable the ability to do Fabric content, as well as the premium capacity or Fabric capacity options when creating a workspace. This, of course, depends on the license that you have overall within your organization for Power BI in general, what you might have existing today, on which of these may be available to you. So once you have that activated, you're able to go in and actually create those resources. And again, you'll see a lot of familiarity inside here. Whenever we actually just go to the home page here, you'll see you're sort of greeted with whatever happens to be available inside of your workspace, or those workloads again that I sort of mentioned here. So with that said, I think we're more or less at the part where it's time to do a little bit of a knowledge check with the audience here. So Amy, I'll kick it back over to you. And folks, this is going to be interactive, so make sure to pull out your phones or open up a web browser, because you'll be able to interact with this.
Nice.
Before we do, there's a great summary here.
There is a great summary here. So thank you, Paul, for talking us through kind of how we enable Fabric. And I just wanted to call out to Shannon in the chat, who is doing such a good job on all the questions. So thank you. Also, keep asking your questions. There's loads of great interactivity there. But to acknowledge, this is live, this is real. I can see your comments. So Paul, tell us a little bit more. What is this in front of us? Because it looks amazing.
Well, it's a great summary of basically everything we just talked about here. But these are Fabric notes. This is actually created by Christopher Magno. He's an employee, Microsoft, also a principal cloud advocate. Okay, he works with me. I'm very happy to work with him. And he's built this site that actually has a lot of really easy to understand graphics that show you various different features and functionalities of Microsoft Fabric. And what you can see here is, again, a lot of those different experiences that we talked about. It explains how that house is built. It's a unified software as a service structure with unified security, like the key to get through the door is unified. And this concept of shortcuts, where if you want to go down the street and access data that happens to be in your neighbor's house, who might be over at AWS, you can sort of do that. So I kind of love this. This is literally everything we talked about in a simple, easy to understand instruction. And I almost feel like it's going to help us answer some of the questions that you have for us.
I was going to say, right, especially calling out all the different types of things you would do in each of these workloads as well. This is a really nice, quick way to kind of look at it above reading lots of different things. So thank you, Chris, for putting that together for us. Okay, onto the knowledge check. How are we doing on time? We're doing very well on time. We've still got a lot to cover, but we'll take a break at this point because we've covered the end-to-end. So what is Microsoft Fabric? It's this unified data platform. It has all these different types of workloads that you can do. And if you're used to using the different services in Azure, you're going to recognize some of them as well, which is fantastic. So without further ado, knowledge check. Go to aka.ms/polls to take part. And we'll jump straight into it. Question 1. Okay, so which of the following is a key benefit of using Microsoft Fabric in data projects? So if you're not already, scan this QR code, go to aka.ms/polls. If you think you know the answer, we want to know also. So A, it allows data professionals to work on data projects independently without the need for collaboration. B, it requires duplication of data across different systems and teams to ensure data availability. Or C, it provides a single integrated environment for data professionals and the business to collaborate on data projects. So,
I'm seeing the chats lighting up here with a lot of C's.
Interesting. C's. That's good. And okay, I think we've got some quorum here. Let's keep going. So which of the following is a key benefit of using Microsoft Fabric? It is C. So good job, those in the comments who put that in the comments. I'm glad you didn't think it was A, because I definitely called out you'd be working more with your data neighbors, not less. There is absolutely there is all the need for collaboration, no need for collaboration. And we don't duplicate data. In fact, this unifies data. We can pull in data from all sorts of different resources and actually bring it into that single integrated environment. And professionals and the business was called out in option C as well, which was a key call out from others. Okay, question number 2. If you didn't take part in one and you're starting to get a little bit of the fear of missing out, go to this QR code, aka.ms/polls, take part, let us know what you think. So question number 2, what is the default storage format for Fabric's OneLake? Is it A, Delta Parquet? Is it B, JSON? Is it C, CSV?
Definitely spoilers in the comments section, but I like.
Don't look at the comments. Just answer the question.
This is interesting. Everyone is with us. I love this. This is great.
Good. Okay, we'll give it another second. If you've not started already, go to ak.ms/polls and you can take part. You can tell us if you know the answer. So the question was, what is the default storage format for Fabric's OneLake? It is Delta Parquet. It was A. Paul, do you want to tell us a little bit more about it? You called it out on your diagram quite a lot. I think that was the giveaway.
I want to chime in here too, because I see that there's out of the incorrect choices I've seen in the chat, some folks chose C. And I sort of want to get into just a little bit of an explanation there. So CSV is not the default storage. It's Delta Parquet. And remember, that's that open source data format that brings reliability to the data lake, essentially. And it also brings that enhanced, optimized ability to query utilizing the various different analytics engines. So this is a format, you can learn more about it. Actually, there is a Fabric Notes about that one. So if you go to aka.ms/Fabric Notes, it's somewhere in the middle of the page. We'll explain Delta Parquet in a very, very nice, easy to understand manner. That's what I would recommend for folks who just want to know more there.
Nice. No, that's a good call out. That is a good call out. Okay. Final question. So if you've not taken part already, go to ak.ms/polls. Please don't make me say it again. Question number 3. Which of the following Fabric workloads is used to move and transform data? So Fabric workloads to move and transform data. Is it A, data science? Is it B, data warehousing? Or is it C, data factory?
And this one's interesting because we definitely scrolled through this. Did we necessarily say it? Yes, we did. But the question, but this one came out quick. I'm just trying to think about how we presented that. Spoiler alert. I'm just looking at the comments here, and again,
tell me what the comments say and how we.
And we're all together in this. So, and then Michael's being very funny with use and access database.
Anyway,
great call out. I love references to access.
It's not a data session if we don't have a reference to access databases, right? It's history. Which of the following Fabric workloads is used to move and transform data? The answer is C. It is data factory. Paul, anything extra you wanted to add on to that one?
Well, I would just say for any of these ones, if you want to learn more about them, we're going to have sessions that cover those specific experiences directly. So if you're, you don't understand why or you want to know more, you're like, I'm on the hook here. You've told me the title and what it does, but I really want to try it. That is coming up in one of our sessions. All of those will be covered.
That is a good call out. In fact, Data Factory is being covered by Jasmine on our team, so that's a really, really good call out. She'll be great explanation. She speaks to some of our great events. So, okay, well, that's part 1. Part 1 complete. What we did was we talked a little bit about end-to-end analytics using Microsoft Fabric. So we broke down the fact that Fabric is a software as a solution, unified platform with a OneLake as the base. Think OneDrive for your data, and then all of the different workloads being pulled across that. It's not necessarily a specifically new technology. It's kind of the bringing together of things, if you've already been in the Azure data space, that you might have seen before. So it could be a really friendly environment, especially if you've been in the Power BI space. I feel like the UI is very, very similar. Same with Azure Synapse. There's definitely some synergies there. And so, if you haven't already, go through that Learn Live module in a little bit more detail. Make sure you take in some of those pieces to also get Fabric enabled. That's kind of a key part of that module. Amazing. Let's get into some more technical details. We pulled together these two different modules because it felt like the first one's very, very introductory. This one's going to get into a little bit more of the detail of getting started with Lakehouses in Microsoft Fabric. This is a slightly different learn module. So if you go to ak.ms/learnlive-2023-0829B, you're going to actually find this one. So then it should say getting started with Lakehouses in Fabric. Paul, can you actually show us what that looks like?
You got it. So again, if you follow that link, that should bring you to the following Learn module. So we are on the Get Started with Lakehouses in Microsoft Fabric. You know, what I love too about this is you're hearing this term, it's like lake house. And it sounds like a place you would go for vacation. But what a lake house actually is, I'm going to say it really simply. And then we'll hand it over to Amy, who's going to tell you really, really what all this means. A lake house, and it's going to make so much sense when I say this, is a data lake combined with a data warehouse. It's like a 2-in-1. And then you put the two words together, data lake, data warehouse, and in the middle there you get lake house. So we're going to cover that a little bit more in detail. So if you're wanting to follow along, we're going to jump into the introduction section. From there, we're going to talk about all of what this is, why it's important, and then we're going to have our first actual exercise where we're going to get hands-on with Microsoft Fabric. So hand it over to you, Amy, to tell us all about what is a lake house.
Sure thing. So there is a lot of text on here. I'm a very visual person when I learn. So let's take you back over to our presentation, and I can dig in a little bit to what is a lake house. Got a couple of good slides here that can kind of explain it for you. So a lake house is the foundation of Microsoft Fabric. And the key thing of this one lake house, one lake is the scalable storage layer. Remember that all of those different workloads kind of worked on. But one of the new kind of pushing forward things around Fabric is that it actually uses both, you can query on it using Apache Spark and SQL compute engines for big data processing. So whereas in the past it used to feel like you had to sort of choose between these two different things, so you're doing data warehousing if it's a relational schema, and that's a whole different set of conference sessions that you go into, that's a whole set of different people that you're working on, that kind of thing. And then data lake became, can I be honest, like the exciting part of data analytics for a while. Apache Spark is the cool way to query on data, where it's schema on read, that you're not kind of having to base the schema and beforehand and stuff like that. It's really the bringing together. A lake house is bringing together a data lake and a data warehouse and being able to make those decisions across the same type of data. And actually, when we kind of dig into some of the reasons, there's 4 great reasons here that you would use it. So the Lakehouses use Spark and SQL. So whereas Spark, you think big data, etc., and then SQL, you think structured data, the ability to kind of spread across these two things. Schema on read format, which defines the schema as you need it rather than predefining it before. Also for that one, I mean, just the pace at which we all move, the question, the hundreds of data questions that we have on a daily basis on our business data. Schema on read feels like it's a really good way to be able to kind of keep moving forwards and keep asking different questions of our data rather than feeling like we're kind of stuck with the same schema. But then also having the support of those ACID transactions. So not only can we do schema on read and the ability for all of these people in a single layer to access the same data source. I hear you, all the admins out there panicking. What's happening? Why are we all doing that at the same time? Don't panic. Support for ACID transactions. So we're still going to have consistency. We're still going to have durability and isolation, etc. And that's through this Delta Lake formatted tables for the consistency and integrity. And then also, lake houses are all in a single location. If I didn't call it out enough earlier about data teams, data engineers, data scientists, data analysts, accessing and using that same data is going to just unlock all kinds of goodness on your business data. I've got another nice fabric notes for you.
You know what I love is we just got a question in the chat. What is the difference between a lake house and warehouse within Fabric Lakehouse? Chris has saved the day, aka.ms/fabric notes. But yeah, take it away.
I'm sure Fabric Notes will be saving the day a lot, actually, for a lot of the questions. So definitely one to save for later. Lake house, warehouse. Interestingly, warehouses, I feel like even I know a lot more about, whereas kind of lake house does feel like a slightly newer thing. I remember when someone was like a data lake, like you don't want it to turn into like a data swamp, those types of analogies if it gets all kind of messy. But basically, some of these things show that it's actually quite similar. So, the data volume can be unlimited. That's similar. You can have structured, but in a lake house, you can also have unstructured and semi-structured. You might have different types of personas currently using these different types of things. But again, over time, that might kind of change a little bit. And then, different languages. So again, SQL sits on both sides, but technically Spark, a lot of people using, I know I've used PySpark quite a lot in the past around this kind of stuff, calling out like the use of notebooks and stuff like that. That tends to happen for big data analytics, whereas you might use T-SQL and stuff like that. It's, we can kind of see here, it's a great breakdown of what you can do that's the same, and that there's also quite a lot of differences. And then this idea that one lake, like a lake house, is like both of these is mind-blowing, right? So if you want to learn more about this, go to ak.ms/fabric notes, and we're going to continue into this cycle to learn a little bit more. One thing I wanted to call out about Microsoft Fabric Lakehouses, this is also called out in the Learn module, but I just wanted to kind of put a little bit extra on this. In Microsoft Fabric, when you create a lakehouse in any premium tier workspace, and that is the piece that I just want you to hold on to, the premium tier piece. So licenses, you can either have kind of a pay-per-user license if you've been around Power BI for a while, it's like $5.99 a month or whatever it is nowadays, so as a pay-per-user, so a user to use Power BI and connect to things and all that kind of stuff. And then to use all of the Microsoft Fabric features, you're actually starting to look at capacity, and that can be bought through things like the Azure portal and stuff like that. So rather than thinking of it on a per user basis, you're almost thinking of it on like a capacity size machine, like the amount of cores, for example, that you might need. And this will allow you to create this lake house idea. We're using the trial license, and that does cover it, and that's what Paul will show you, in the sense that that does enable it. But in the future, when we come out of that trial motion, just a note, consider the capacity piece in order to get access to use all of the Microsoft Fabric features. And then before I hand over to Paul and we talk a little bit more about, and we actually see it in action, which really brings all of this to life, you can create and configure a new lakehouse in the data engineering workload. So where we were seeing all those different workloads, in this conversation, we're going to be talking data engineering, and we're going to be able to choose that from that bottom left option. But when you create a lakehouse, it actually creates 3 different things. So don't be shocked by this, because all of a sudden you're like, where did all these things come from? So the first thing is you create a lakehouse. The lakehouse is the storage and the metadata. That's where you interact with files, folders, tables of data. We're going to see all that in a second in action. It also creates you a data set, and that's by default. And this is automatically created as like a data model, which you will have previously seen in Power BI reports. So if you've used Power BI in the past, the idea of a data set is not new to you. Power BI reports are built from data sets. And so that's where it kind of builds that piece as well. And then we were talking about the ability, lakehouses don't usually have the ability to query on them using SQL. That's where the SQL endpoint comes into action. And so that's where you can have a read-only SQL endpoint that you can connect through and query data in T-SQL or Transact SQL, sorry. So the ability then to have either a notebook experience or a SQL endpoint experience is then kind of open to you. And these 3 things will literally look like this. So they will all have the same name that you use, but then also the type will be called out as slightly different. So you'll have the lakehouse, a data set, which can be built on in a report. And then you'll have the SQL endpoint, which will allow you to actually query on unstructured data in a structured SQL schema. And so with that, Paul, it's time. It's time to show Fabric in action. Let's take a look at all that we've learned so far.
Okay, so if you are following along with the Learn module, Amy's really covered the first 3 units here. So we are starting at Unit 4. So if you are following along, definitely catch up to us here. At this point, we're going to actually create and ingest data with the Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse. So in order to do this, you will need that Fabric trial license. So again, if you haven't signed up, you'll want to go to the aka.ms/upgrade to Fabric. That will bring you to a blog post on the Fabric community blog that will tell you everything that you need to know to get started. Once you have that set up, we'll go ahead and click here to launch exercise. And this will get us started for today's content. So it mentions here that this could take about 30 minutes to complete. I think it's going to be a little less than that, and we'll go a little bit faster. But again, we've sort of talked about these concepts already. We've talked about why you would use this and the fact that this one lake concept built on top of Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 allows us to actually build that foundational data store for everything that we work with data-wise in Microsoft Fabric. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we'll do is create a workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in to my Microsoft Fabric instance. So head into app.fabric.microsoft.com. I'm already logged in here using an account that I created for a personal M365 dev account. So you'll see those instructions in that upgrade to Fabric link. So there's nothing going on here that I'm seeing that you're not seeing. I followed the same instructions myself. What we're then going to go ahead and do here is click on the Microsoft Fabric icon here. And we can click here on Power BI just to launch into that Power BI experience. And it sort of tells us over here that what we want to do is select workspaces, and we're going to create a new workspace. Now you want to be like very conscientious here that you choose a capacity, trial, premium, or Fabric that's capable of creating Fabric types of items. So I'll go ahead and adhere to that when we create this. So if we select workspaces, go ahead and choose new workspace. We'll call this Learn Live, Get Started with Lakehouses. And this is the magic part down here in the advanced section, the part that you should pay attention to, I should say. You'll likely want to choose trial if you're utilizing the trial experience. Of course, there are if you do have the option or your enterprise is enabled, you could similarly choose premium capacity or Fabric capacity. And you'll also likely, especially for this demo, just leave the default storage format set to small data set. And then we'll click apply. It should go ahead and create that empty workspace for us. And that's where our Lakehouse is going to eventually live or be created in. So we're now in that newly created workspace. We see that it's empty. I'm now going to go down here to the next step where we're going to actually create the Lakehouse. So what it says to do here is we're going to switch to the data engineering experience. If you don't see that, then you haven't enabled Fabric. So there is a link there, again, to get you the proper setup if that doesn't work for you. And what we're going to do is go ahead and create a Lakehouse with the name of our choice. So I'll go ahead and click here to change into the data engineering experience. And I'll actually select Lakehouse. And what I find really interesting here is we're more or less about to create unlimited storage for Microsoft Fabric. And this is all we need to tell it, the name. That's all we need to do. So I'll go ahead and give us a name. It can't accept spaces, so I'm going to give an underscore there, and we'll call this Learn Live. And go ahead and create. Similar to what Amy had just shown, this is going to then create that data set SQL endpoint in the Lakehouse items that were shown earlier. So this may take a moment. So we'll let that bake, if you will, and we'll continue forward. So now that we've created this, the first thing we're going to notice here is 2 folders. There's a tables folder, and this will contain your tabular data that's capable of being queried using SQL semantics. And this will always be stored in that open source Delta Lake file format or Delta Parquet, as we referred to it earlier. And then the files folder can contain really any kind of data. Can also be referenced using shortcuts, and we'll show a quick example of that. So what I mean by that is you could store video or audio content here in the files folder, but not necessarily in the tables folder, if that makes sense. And you can also convert from one to the other, and I'll show that in just a moment. So what we're going to do next, we'll go ahead and upload a CSV file. I saw some funny comments about working with CSV earlier, but I promise we're going to make it better. We're going to show you how to make it better. So if you're using Edge, you can right-click here, save the link as. I don't know why on my machine it always prompts me that it's going to save this as a text file. So I'll just come down here, select all files, and choose here sales.csv. We'll go ahead and save that. Then what we can do is return to our tab. We're going to go click on the while we're in the file section, we'll click upload and actually upload this very file into there. And after it's been uploaded, we're going to just quickly explore it. And we should see a preview of the contents of that file. So what this will look like, we'll go down here to files. There's 3 dots here. We can click here, go to upload files. Oh, yikes, I had to close a modal. So let me try that again. And we'll go ahead and select that newly downloaded sales.csv file. So here we go. We'll let that upload. Should be just a moment. Now it's technically in the cloud. And as I mentioned, once it's there, we can sort of click into that. It's a small CSV file. It shouldn't be too astonishing here. And you'll just notice that the way that it's laid out when this loads is we do have like a header data on that top row there. So next, like I said, we're going to make it better. I know nobody wants to work with CSV files. Before we do that, let's just talk really quick about shortcuts. We've talked about this idea of shortcuts, and I saw a few questions in the chat. Whenever you use a shortcut, it does not copy data. It is literally like a virtual link out to wherever that data may reside. So if that data changes wherever it's originally stored, that's how it will be looked at when viewed through the shortcut. It's a single copy of data. It's never copied in. To set those up, you can right click or left click, again on the 3 dots, select new shortcut. This will launch the shortcut wizard. You'll see here, there is support for external sources. These include ADLS Gen 2, which isn't surprising because that's what OneLake is built on top of. Amazon S3, which I find that really cool and interesting that you can take data from another cloud without necessarily copying it, link to it, and be able to utilize it within Microsoft Fabric. Or if you've got internal sources, and I like this because it's smart. It knows we just created this Learn Live Lakehouse. That's right there for us to select. We can select that, and then if we wanted to create a shortcut to any files that may exist in that files folder, we could go ahead and do that. It should see those. That's just a rudimentary demonstration, but I think you get the idea there. So now that we've covered shortcuts rather quick, we're going to go do some interesting things with our data. So first thing we'll do, we're going to make it better. We're going to load it into a table. And this is really cool. So you can actually click on the dot menu next to the sales.csv file, and it's going to give us an option that says load to tables. And once we do that, it's going to essentially move that into this tables folder where it'll then be stored in Delta Parquet format with the Delta log, etc., which we'll see in just a moment. So let's back up here. And when we select the 3 dots here, we can choose load to tables, select new table. I'm going to use a name of sales. And as we saw briefly when we were looking at the actual preview of the data, we know that the header contains column names and it's a CSV, so the separator is a comma. So we'll leave all that as default and select load. And this will take just a moment, but it's going to actually then convert that and have it now accessible in the tables folder, which means you can probably guess we can start interacting with it like it's a table. So doing things like issuing SQL statements and queries against that. So one interesting thing to note here is that once that's concluded and is actually loaded into the sales table, you can click to view files, and this will allow you to verify. You'll be able to see the Delta log as well as the Delta Parquet formatted file. So once that's concluded, And just in case you don't see it, you might be able to click refresh here. You see there's our sales data. And it's not a flat file anymore. It's a table. And from here, as we load that preview up, you'll see it's not just any ordinary table. It's a table that's viewing that data because it's stored in the Delta Parquet format. If we click that view files that I just brought up, that was clicking the three dots, select view files, you'll see the Delta log as well as the Parquet file format. So interesting stuff. We've made this better. Now let's do something with this. So we're going to use SQL to query the table. And in order to do this, we're going to select over in the top right, we're going to change from Lakehouse mode to SQL endpoint mode. So remember, so far we've sort of been working in this as a data lake, essentially. Now we're going to start working with it more like a data warehouse. So let's go ahead, select that drop down here and change this to, it's now going to be the SQL endpoint mode. So loading your SQL endpoint. And from here, as you might imagine, we can start to work with this by doing things like issuing SQL queries. So let's go ahead and do that. You'll see here's our data again, populated in that tabular format. We can see all of our sales data. Let's go ahead and queue this up. We'll select new SQL query. And down here, I can select this example query we have here. This is doing some simple, it's actually computing revenue by looking at a quantity of items sold and multiplying times their price to determine revenue. So let's go ahead and just demonstrate, like we've gone from a flat CSV file, converted it into table format, and now because we've done that, we can now operate on that data utilizing SQL, which is awesome. And there's our result, very quickly produced. Then what we're going to do is create a visual query. And I love this. So this is actually leveraging Power Query so that sometimes you're creating complex queries. I don't know about y'all. I sometimes don't like writing SQL by hand. I usually like asking my favorite Azure OpenAI powered Copilot assistant to do those things for me. But in this case, the power of Power Query really makes this simple. It allows you to sort of like visualize, if you will. So what I'm going to do, I can grab the sales table, copy this over, and that's like the start point of this. By the way, I just want to point out while that's loading, if you scroll down, you'll see these SQL query as well as the visual query actually getting saved in this queries area here. So if you find something that's useful, you can save that, come back to it again, etc. And I find this really interesting. Again, notice what's happened here. We're actually looking at our data and what is being reported as a SQL Server database. It is in fact a database at this point. Our table that we've loaded is here, and now we've got the power of Power Query. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to follow the instructions for a sample that shows us how to do some interesting creation of new columns. So what we're going to do is select Manage Columns. We're going to choose only the sales order number and the sales order line number. So I'll select this, choose columns. An easy way to get those, I'll deselect everything by choosing Select All, and then choose the top two and select OK. That's going to give us like the first part. So you'll see here, the visual query has expanded now. It sees that we've chosen these columns. Well, now we want to perform some transformations on those. So what we can do is go to the Transform menu. We'll select Group By, and we're going to use the following settings that are shown here. We'll group by sales order number, create a new column name called Line Items. By counting the distinct values, we'll actually choose the operation, and we'll do this by counting those on the sales order line number column. So following those steps here, choose Group By, sales order number, name the new column Line Items. We'll choose Count Distinct Values, and we'll do this on the sales order line number column. Once we do that, that's going to conclude the creation of our query and should create a result that has that newly created column with that count of line items, and it does. But not only that, what I really like here is whatever Power Query is doing, it will tell you exactly the SQL that it's generating. You click here on View SQL, you can actually see what is created here. A SQL query that I know I wouldn't have wanted to write by hand, So I really love this feature. I think this is really cool. But what will we do from here? So I've shown how we can go from getting data in CSV format, converting it to table format. Like, you see where this is going. Like, we're making value of this data. And what is the most valuable way to present findings in data? Well, I like a good, what do you think, Amy? I like a good.
Well, you know me, big Power BI fan, so I'd go straight into a report. However, I just wanted to pause you there, and there was such a good comment made in the chat. Actually, Shannon answered it straight away, but I kind of wanted to call it out on the stream as well, which was you were showing, obviously, like, that's how in the browser you were querying on that data using that SQL endpoint. And someone said, but how would I do that in like Data Studio, something, you know, a tool that I'm used to, maybe more comfortable with? And Shannon called out, you can literally take the SQL endpoint URL and then open it directly in all of our other tooling as well. So, I mean, Power Queries in there, visual, you know, versions of things, the actual code, and then you can just edit code. Editing code is much easier than writing it from scratch. So yeah, calling out all those different options, that's really powerful, right? Because everyone can kind of work with the tools they know and the comfort that they know and just get the job done.
That's the thing I always hear about this when you show this off, is like, is it SQL? Yes.
But is it though? Yes.
Yes. So what we'll do next, we'll create a report. So at the bottom of the SQL endpoint page, it's going to create a model tab. And this is essentially, if you've ever worked in Power BI, it's like a data model, essentially. These are usually more complex. I know I'm using a basic, but notice I've gone from a CSV file to essentially a rudimentary data model. If we needed to do things like connect things and make relations, we could do that here. Which
this
is
was
awesome.
Also asked in the chat, by the way. Relationships came up. Shannon jumped in there. You'll see it in a minute. You'll see it in a minute. And this is where it is. So yeah, if you're used to Power BI, you know the modeling is done in this kind of format. And Paul calling it out there. I don't think we have anything to connect it to in this demo, do we? But this is where it would happen.
You get like the idea. But if you had that set up, and everything we're showing here, it's really like that, you know, showing you just exactly what this engine can do. If I click here on new report, that'll launch me into essentially a Power BI browser experience. And from here, we can start to work with that data. I'll let that load up. And while that's doing here, just kind of scroll through the actual instructions as they're written on Learn. So what we're going to do, once that loads up, we'll be able to design our own report. Hopefully people are familiar with this. And if you're not, Power BI is cool. I'll be serious. I'm one of those like self-taught Power BI folks. I think a lot of folks are. I'm the person who goes in there and I click the buttons until it does what I need it to do, or makes it work the thing. And then if I have a question, I go to the Power BI community.
Yes, the community. Exactly.
With those sorts of things. But now that we have this up, let's go ahead and we'll create a quick visualization utilizing the item and quantity fields there. So now that I have this launched, let's make sure I'm signed in. We will go ahead and begin creating the actual valuable, you know, report or visualization from our data here. So
I just want to call out actually something that just triggered me there when you were signing in. Paul, you followed the upgrade to Fabric instructions, right? And you've literally created this brand new tenant, and that's what we're using in this demo. So there's no internal Microsoft magic going on here that Paul's got access to and no one else has. This is exactly how our viewers would kind of do this as well.
You will see the same things I see because I followed the same instructions. So just hopefully there's a good one-to-one there, and hopefully we're not losing folks. Hopefully folks are actually able to follow along. So once this is loaded up, it's very easy. We know we want item and quantity, so I can select those over here on the right-hand data side. And that, you know, whatever our data happens to be modeled as, you can sort of see how this is. And Power BI quickly assumes how we might want to visualize that. I know this is really hard to see, but it is populating that. And that's not the best visual probably for this. And I know just from following the Learn module content, what it really wants us to do is change this into something a little bit more fitting for the data. So we're going to change this to a clustered bar chart. Now, how we can do that and also make this easier to work with, we can select this collapse to collapse the data field, collapse the filters field. And then what I'll look for here is clustered bar chart, select that. And now it's very easy to see like what the most popular items are in our sales data. In this case, it is a water bottle. By and far, second up being the patch kit. So you can very quickly see how no matter what data you have, and whether that's even stored in like a more basic CSV style format, we can raise that up to the power of SQL, use the power of Power Query, transform it, create reports off of it. And this is just one of the experiences in Fabric, and it's not all of what this experience does. I want to just be clear here. We're really only scratching the surface. So with that said, this has been the hardest part of today's content, or the most technical piece. If you've been able to produce the same result, what we'll go ahead and do is save this. I'll just click here, File, Save, and we'll call this Sales Report, whatever you happen to want to call that. And we'll save that in the workspace. And now, when we go back to our workspace, some folks might be able to make this connection here. All of those things that Amy showed us that get created when you create our Lakehouse, if we actually click on the workspace itself that we created, you'll see those here. There's the data set, the SQL endpoint, the Lakehouse, and now the sales report as well. And of course, the final step, if you're doing this in an enterprise environment and you want to blow away this demo content so you're not charging your employer, you can click here on the 3 dots here, go to Workspace Settings, and then over here in Other, remove this workspace. And that will clean up everything that we've basically just worked on here. So now that we've concluded the exercise, that means we're ready for another interactive session with everybody. And that means it's check.
It certainly does, but I just want to call out from the comments, so many Power Query fans. We've also got a few self-taught, lots of people self-taught. Someone called out self-taught Power BI 7 years. So there's a long legacy for Power BI going on, and yeah, the community call out there. But Paul, Fabric has a community, right? So just like we were saying, like, want to find out how to do something, go to the Power BI community. Now Fabric community is the place to be, right?
That's right. And that's just for folks that want to know, that's at community.fabric.microsoft.com. The same type of support for folks. I know all of our Power BI fans get this. The same support that you got, when you're asking questions on the Power BI forums, all of the Fabric experiences essentially have places where you can ask questions as well. So definitely, if you're getting involved in this, I like that Fabric community. Should we call ourselves Weavers? I'll send that one up. I'll send that one up the chain, Eric. That's a good one.
So where did that idea come from? A stream that we did. Nice.
Community ideas. Yeah.
But also, I think I was saying, Paul, I think we were even talking about this just earlier in a different meeting, was if you ask one question and somebody answers it, 1,000 people are going to need that same answer to that same question. So no question shouldn't be put on the Fabric community, right? It's all go to that place and get things answered as well. And then once they're answered, everyone else can find them. So yeah, amazing demo, Paul. That really, you made it look really simple, if I'm honest.
Well, Fabric made it simple. It's one of those kind of demos where the product truth is actually shining through here. Yeah.
And that was just that data engineering experience. And as you called out, we're actually going to cover even more in the data engineering experience. There's so much more to that engineering experience in other sessions in this series. So if that looked incredible to you and you want to learn more, make sure you follow along each week, or catch us on demand as well. All of this is going to be available on demand. Okay, so we are in the knowledge check. Don't make me say it again. Go to aka.ms/polls, and that's where we can actually all of these questions. Let's have your answers. Put it in the chat, but don't give it away too quickly in the chat because you'll let everyone else know. Okay, so clear your mind of those previous questions. We're on to question 4. What is a Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse? Is it A, relational database based on Microsoft SQL Server database engine? Is it B, a hierarchy of folders and files in an Azure Data Lake Store Gen 2? Or is it C, an analytical store that combines the file storage flexibility of a data lake with the SQL-based query capabilities of a data warehouse? So remember, you can very quickly do this on your phone as well if you scan that QR code or vote at ak.ms/polls. So question number 4 was, what is a Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse? Paul, is there much coming up in the chat?
It does look like, yet again, everybody's together on this one. I'm seeing a very certain answer coming through, not to spoil for anybody.
No spoilers, no spoilers. Okay, spoilers. What answer have the audience got?
The audience has spoken, except for one person now. Everybody except one person thinks that it is C.
Okay, that's correct. It is C, an analytical data store that combines the file storage flexibility of a data lake with the SQL-based query capabilities of a data warehouse. Any comments, Paul? B is an interesting one. Is that what that other person?
That is, yes,
mentioned?
it actually is, and that is an interesting one to choose. I'm thinking I can kind of feel or understand why you would choose that.
Okay. But we did call out
things, right, but Lakehouses aren't, they're not folders in ADLS too. They're so yeah, I think essentially what we really want to look at here is a thing that combines the structure of a data warehouse and a data lake. So
yes, I was going to say lake house, right? We pulled those two things together on that initial visual. So that data lake with the flexibility and of the file storage, the no schema, the Spark queries, all that kind of stuff, and then the SQL-based query capabilities that you have of a data warehouse, and it's bringing the house and the data lake together. Amazing. Question number 5, if you're not already taking part and you want to, go to ak.ms/polls or scan that QR code. You want to include data in an external Azure Data Lake Store Gen 2 location in your lakehouse without the requirement to copy the data. What should you do? A, create a data pipeline that uses a copy data activity to load the external data into a file. B, create a shortcut. Or C, create a data flow Gen 2 that extracts the data and loads it into a table.
We've said this one a few times, and we showed it, but we didn't really do it. If that's a hint. We showed it. We didn't really create a blank. We showed it. This one, I think everybody's together on. I'm not seeing any deviations here.
No deviations. Okay. And what's the answer from the audience?
There's the conclusive choice of B.
Interesting.
Someone put an emoji of a B. I like that.
An emoji of a B. Interesting. The answer is correct. B is create a shortcut. Me and Paul discussed this earlier. You can technically do all of these 3 things, right? But the key in this question that was asked is without the requirement to copy the data, and that's where the creating of the shortcut is so impressive, really. It's not copying the data. You're literally sort of accessing the data. It reminds me of, I don't know if this is right or not, direct query in Power BI, that type of thing, where it was kind of like you didn't have to like load all the data in and copy it or anything. It was like reaching out to the data source, but in a read-only format.
Symlinks in a file system. Is that valid? I mean, file's really over here. Well, file can change, but yeah, I think we get the idea. It's like, yeah.
Nice. Sweet. So question 5 was all about shortcuts. As Paul said, the giveaway was we showed it, we didn't do it. And final question, if you've not taken a part in any question, take part in this question. Go to ak.ms/polls for question number 6. You want to use Apache Spark to interactively explore data in a file in the Lakehouse. What should you do? A, create a notebook. B, switch to the SQL endpoint mode. Or C, create a data flow Gen 2. So the question was, you want to use Apache Spark to interactively explore data in a file in the Lakehouse. What should you do?
Well, there's a hint. The answer to this was in the Fabric note that we showed, the second Fabric note. It was in there.
It was in there. It was in there. I think there's a couple of call outs in the question.
So this one will require a little bit of research to get to, and we already do have a little bit of a split here.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I'm surprised no one's chose the other wrong answer. Okay.
Have we got a good?
It's split, so we see a lot of A's and a lot of C's.
Okay. Interesting.
A data flow won't let you interactively explore. That's more on the data integration side. For switching to SQL endpoint mode, that involves using T-SQL. So I think the answer, and the audience is starting to very much converge on, is A.
My PowerPoint's just at that crucial moment stopped working. There we go. A is correct. Create a notebook. So we didn't actually do this one. So that was a much trickier conversation, right? The question, sorry, for us to do. But we switched to the SQL endpoint and we didn't use Spark. We used T-SQL, right? And so creating a notebook, you can use Spark to interact with that. So that sales data, Paul, if we just hadn't have switched to the endpoint, just above it, there was create a notebook, wasn't there? And that's right. Literally where you would have done that. And doesn't matter that the data was exactly the same underneath, you would have been able to do that. Nice.
Excellent. Well, I saw a really good question come through here too. If a customer has invested heavily in Synapse or ADLS Gen 2, following cloud scale analytics landing zone best practices, and why should they migrate to Fabric? That's a really interesting one, and can be taken apart a few different ways. And I'm not saying that, stop your production environment and immediately move over. But what I will say that we've shown here today, at least, is we know that shortcuts can access existing data in ADLS Gen 2. So you can actually kind of set up like a separate environment where their environment as it exists today would stay intact, move over to Fabric utilizing the shortcuts for now. And if you saw that was working or working better, you could then move the data that's currently in ADLS Gen 2, maybe get it, migrated into the One Lake. And then from there, you would have that full migration going over. But why should they migrate to Fabric? There may be a more seamless integration that's involved there. I can't speak to the specific scenario, but I just did want to address that question. That seems like a difficult one. And we're not afraid of difficult questions here. But we only have time for one. So with that,
no more difficult questions, everyone. Interestingly, one of the things I've thought about a lot with Fabric workloads and like a positive reason as well to switch is from in the past of pulling together lots of different Azure services, actually moving into another service felt like quite a big addition to your data architecture, right? Like if you were normally a data warehouse, Power BI kind of shop doing business intelligence, moving through to something a little bit more unstructured with sort of more data science felt like a real leap. Like that to be a lot of designing and all that kind of stuff. I feel like with Fabric, that's less of the case. I actually think you can do a lot more easy testing, figure it out, try and get your team involved, get data teams skilled up as well, right? If you're a team of people that have been working in a data organization on the same things and you're having to bring in new types of skills, I think it's a nice, easy, low-hanging fruit sort of way to kind of get involved. So again, you could actually expand your platform. And then as everyone's talking about AI, right, as we start to move into how do you bring large language models into this kind of stuff, it absolutely can be done in Fabric. So keep progressing in that data analytics space is what I'd always say.
Well said, Amy. Yeah, I agree. I think what you just said there, and there's also the soft side of this, is Fabric enables collaboration. That goes beyond just the technical solutions that would be in some of these standalone services.
Absolutely. Amazing. We only have a few minutes left, Paul, so let's jump and summarize what we have talked about today. So if we take a look quickly at the slides, we'll just kind of round us out, and we've got a few call to actions for everyone as well. So in summary, what have we done? We've described end-to-end analytics in Microsoft Fabric. We've described some of the core features and capabilities of Lakehouses. Remember, Lakehouse, a data lake and a data warehouse, and bringing those capabilities together. We actually created a lakehouse very quickly, unlimited data storage, and all we had to do was name it. We ingested data into files and tables we created in that lakehouse, and then we actually queried on top of that table in SQL. We did that visually as well. And then something that's not even on here, we actually added it straight to a Power BI report using that data model. So we've covered a lot. It's been a really cool session. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for asking all the questions in the chat as well. We have barely scratched the surface of what you can do with these lake houses. Check out the reference documentation, scan this QR code, go to that aka.ms link to find out a little bit more about lake houses, especially when it comes to your specific workloads. Again, demos are lovely and they do show wicked things. When you start getting in there yourself and you have some of the more specific questions, our documentation is absolutely the place to go. Finally, we've covered 2 different Learn modules. If you didn't follow along and you now want to go back and take a look at these yourself, just follow these 2 aka.ms Learn Live links, where it's Learn Live 2023-08-29, and then A is end-to-end analytics using Microsoft Fabric, and B is getting started with Lakehouses in Fabric. You can scan either of these QR codes and then you can get access, and I highly encourage you to do so. Up next, if you've enjoyed this session as much as we have, please join us again. Some other members of our team are going to talk a little bit about using Apache Spark in Microsoft Fabric this time next week, so on September the 5th, 2023. And you can continue all of this learning. So again, you can scan these QR codes to get registered now if Apache Spark in Fabric is something that's of interest to you. And Paul, take us away with some of our sort of further call to actions.
Sure. Well, as you know, we're continuing with this series for another 9 weeks. So join us next week for Use Apache Spark and Microsoft Fabric. And of course, get registered. Go ahead on over to aka.ms/learnlive-get-started-Microsoft-Fabric to go ahead and get registered, get notifications in your inbox when these sessions are going to go live. And yeah, stick around for the entire series. And of course, as you're doing this and you're following along with the Learn module content that we're going through interactively, you'll want to also register for the Cloud Skills Challenge. So that's at aka.ms/fabric-csc. If you completed one of the modules today, why not sign up for the challenge? You'll be able to track whether you've completed, and the way we actually put this thing together, it's every available Fabric module that's on Microsoft Learn today. So there isn't anything else to learn interactively once you've filled out and completed that leaderboard. And we'd love to know what folks are thinking about that. So definitely would challenge folks to sign up here and also just look at how you compare across the world. We're it's wild. I think we're at like 460, 70 signups. Just it's growing as this live stream is on. So that's awesome. We'd love to see everybody be able to complete that. And who knows, try to get the attention and maybe see what we can do for folks who do complete this. I'd love to have a reward if we could possibly get something created for this. And finally, if you came here and you watched the magic, but you didn't set up access to Fabric, you're definitely going to want to do this, because this way you can experience the magic. And by doing that, head on over to aka.ms/upgrade-to-fabric. That will allow you to try the Microsoft Fabric preview trial for free. No credit card required. You'll get a fixed trial capacity for any user within the tenant that you set up there. And again, an easy way to get started. And for folks who do visit that link, that is the new Fabric community that we've been talking about here. So that is actually a post on the Fabric community by one of our esteemed colleagues. So yeah, if you want to keep the conversation going, if the party, you just don't want this to end, I would say go to the community. There's always something happening there.
There is always something happening there. That's the key. Amazing. Well, with that, we will wrap this up. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Thank you for following along. Thank you for taking part in the polls, asking great questions. Big shout out to Shannon in the chat. You've done a phenomenal job of answering all those questions. So thank you for your support there. And yeah, with that, we'll say goodbye for now, but we hope to see you in the next Learn Live series for Microsoft Fabric.
All right. See y'all then. you.